I just felt my heart sink. Just like, I don't want to do this. This is not me. This is not what I want. I don't, this is not why I started this business. This is not why I'm in business. I made a decision that day. I was like, I'm out. Like, I gotta get out. I came out as non-binary about 4 years ago, and it was a surprise for me. It was like one of the aha moments like people have. And it was very clear this is who I am. I wanted to present myself in a different way, dress up differently. And I just didn't want to continue to pretend like I was something that I wasn't.
Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast exploring life-changing career moves. I'm your host, Brian Akar. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the bold decisions that transform their careers and lives. Let's dive in. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Why I Left. What happens when the life you've built still works, but no longer fits because the person doing the work has changed? Today's conversation is about the kind of leaving we don't talk about enough. Leaving identities, expectations, and environments that no longer allow you to be fully yourself. It's about what happens when personal clarity collides with professional reality and the courage it takes to choose alignment over autopilot. My guest today, Kjell van Zoen, and their story reminds us that career transitions aren't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they're just deeply personal. Sometimes they unfold quietly. And sometimes the bravest move is simply telling the truth to yourself first. Let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. Our guest today is Kjell van Zoen, a leadership coach, organizational development practitioner, and guide for people navigating moments of personal and professional inflection. Kjell's work sits at the intersection of identity, leadership, and intentional choice. Over the course of their career, they've moved across industries, built and exited multiple ventures, and navigated the complex transition from entrepreneurship into corporate life, all while doing the deeper work of redefining who they are and how they want to show up in the world. In this conversation, we talk about alignment versus comfort, ambition versus agency, and what it really means to lead without hiding, especially in systems that weren't designed with everyone in mind. This is a thoughtful, honest discussion about growth, clarity, and the cost of staying in places that no longer reflect who you're becoming. So I'm glad to share this one with you, Kjell. Welcome to Why I Left. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Brian. Thank you so much. And that was a really thoughtful introduction. That was amazing how you pieced that together.
Appreciate it. And look, I always love to give shouts out to how we get connected. And actually, Lori from last season connected us. And so small world, but I love like this little conclave of folks in the Northwest who have been on this show. And so just a big shout out to Lori for connecting us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Lori.
Yeah, of course. And now I would love to start off when people look at your work today, they see clarity and intention. And when I was doing my background, I definitely saw that as well. But I'd love for you to kind of rewind the tape a bit. What were you optimizing for early in your career?
I mean, early in my career when I was starting businesses, I was always optimizing for time, right? Because time is money. And that was the focus. And then at some point I came across lean manufacturing, like as the LEAN, lean manufacturing as in Toyota production system, Kaizen, Kanban, Agile, whatever you call it, all kind of like falls in the same universe. And I kind of really started optimizing in a much bigger way and very quickly learned, well, at the same time, I was also really interested in already kind of optimizing culture, which is a strange thing to say, but really like around the idea of like optimizing for a more inclusive culture, for less top down. Like I was the owner of the company and we had at one point about 25 employees, and I didn't love being an owner or a leader in that sense of I have to tell everybody what to do, the buck stops at me kind of idea. It's like, you know what, this is a shared thing. Like I have to take more responsibility than others in certain aspects, and I own that. But I really wanted it to be less hierarchical. And what I found with like once I got into lean manufacturing is that it kind of requires that to be less hierarchical. Like it's almost like turning the pyramid like upside down, where like I'm at the bottom holding everybody else up, in the sense of like I'm just there to ensure everybody else has what they need to do a good job. And that's true optimization. So I started optimizing a lot more for having the right culture that allows for collaboration.
And if you could just tell the audience, what was that company that you initially started this that you're
Yeah, it was
speaking of?
called Plywerk, Plywerk. You can still find it, it's still there, Plywerk.com. I ended up selling the brand essentially, and closing down the business here in Portland. And we mounted photography onto bamboo and maple panels. So it was like a way to present photography or signage or art or illustration in a way that was sustainable, and kind of like eco conscious. And I don't know, we kind of saw ourselves as like the Patagonia of that industry, like the Patagonia of the coffee mug with your image on it, or your mouse mat with your photo on it, or whatever, like the photo products industry.
And who or what shaped your earliest understanding of success? And when did that definition start to truthfully maybe feel a little insufficient?
My earliest one was I took a class called Digital Business at University College London when I was studying there. And I was doing Dutch studies and I had to take an elective and I did digital business because I'd had a few businesses at that point, some very small ones, just one or two people. And I was interested in this. And this whole class was like during the dot-com boom, was set up during the dot-com boom in England. I took it in 1999 and they had a person come to class who had taken the class 4 years prior and had just sold his business for £10 million or something like that. And he had taken the business plan he'd written for that class and launched this online business and sold it. And I was like, whoa, I can do that. That's cool. That's what I'm doing this class for. I can write a business plan. And so I wrote a business plan called Book Host. And I went to the Netherlands and I started a publishing company based on this idea of Book Host Publishing. And, it failed. I learned a lot, but I had this like seed planted in my mind of like, I want to make a lot of money and then use that money to do good. But it was always focused on like the lot of money part, and I think over time, my perspectives have shifted a lot more towards like I want to build really good cultures. I want to be a part of good cultures because that's ultimately going to make for a better experience for myself and everybody around me. Then, I mean, yeah, you need enough money, but that wasn't the end goal. Wasn't to like sell and be a millionaire. That's no longer like an end goal I have. Would I like to have more money? Sure, but like, do I need it? Depends. It depends if I end up in a healthcare crisis in America. But for everyday purposes, I'm content. So the shift has gone from like this goal of like I gotta grow, grow, grow at all costs and sell, which I definitely tried to do. Yeah, and there was a very key moment in my life where like that shifted, and it's when I was running Plywork. I was about 8 years into it. I was at this point where like either we close the business or we scale. And I was talking to some people in Portland, um, an investor, and also he brought me to the table with another person who was a potential investor who had a framing business. And we were at this very fancy club that until very recently was a men's only club. And they were talking about how to scale Plywork and get into every strip mall in America and all this stuff. And I just felt my heart sink, just like I don't want to do this. This is not me. This is not what I want. I don't. This is not why I started this business. This is not why I'm in business. It just felt icky. It was
Yeah.
like it's kind of masculinity and capitalism all kind of rolled together, and I was in the middle of it, and I just didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And I made a decision that day. I was like, I'm out. Like I gotta get out.
Yeah. And I love that you share that story because that's what we talk about a lot here, right? These career decisions, these career transitions. And so I'm hearing this, like that moment where you like realize, look, you're succeeding on paper, things are going well,
Yeah,
but things started to drift internally when that meeting happened. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. One of the things I noticed, and you've shared that on some of our previous chats, that your career transitions over the last few years have been closely connected to a personal transition as well. How do you think about the relationship between identity and work?
maybe I'll start where I'm at now because like even like maybe since we first spoke, I've continued to kind of like transition my relationship to work. Right now, I'm at a place where I'm recognizing there's ways in which I want to express myself. Well, let me back up, I guess, a little bit. So I came out as non-binary about 4 years ago, and it was, you know, a surprise for me. It was like one of the aha moments like people have. And it was very clear this is who I am. I wanted to present myself in a different way, dress up differently. And I just didn't want to continue to pretend like I was something that I wasn't. And it shifted my perspective of work because I was working for a company that is relatively progressive as far as companies go. Very progressive, I would say. And I fit in that culture very comfortably. But then once I came out, I didn't. And it wasn't that they didn't care, they just didn't know how to manage someone going through the kind of transition I was going through. And I didn't know how to manage going through a transition because I'd never done it before. And it became a pretty challenging situation for them and for me. And I'm saying all this in a way to kind of like not lay blame on them and not lay blame on myself, but it's more of like a cultural reality that a lot of people are in. And I think I'm lucky because, like, I think I am lucky. I am more privileged than many still, regardless of stepping down the ladder a little bit. And it was really hard, and I ended up losing that job essentially because of it. And I went through some pretty hard times, like internally, and changes in my life, which included a divorce of a relationship I was in for 18 years. And luckily, we're very close still when it was very amicable, but still, it's not easy. So, job, divorce, it all happened like in the same year essentially. And then I ended up going back into that industry again because of money essentially. Okay, so yeah, bringing it back to identity and work. So my identity was what I've realized over since then, since kind of leaving that company and then having to come back to the industry. I kind of begrudgingly came back into that industry, the efficiency industry, working in corporate environment essentially because I needed the money to survive, to live, and have a job and all that. But it wasn't my passion. My passion is really like ideally, like given all things I could do, I would be a one-on-one coach to people going through kind of work transitions themselves. That's what I'm good at. That's what I'm best at, and what I enjoy the most. Transformational coaching for individuals. Being in this industry, like it's not my passion. So like all my life being an entrepreneur, and in many ways, like a lot of people do, I kind of associated my passion with my work, and that just wasn't there, and I kind of lost myself a little bit in that. But I was also finding myself at the same time and expressing myself in new ways that was really amazing and wonderful. It had nothing to do with work. So then I was like, well, what else do I want to express myself as? And it's music. And I've been playing music since I was 16, and I found these tapes that I recorded when I was 17 in the mid 90s, which I don't remember, where I wrote entire songs and sang them and played them and had drums and everything on a little 4-track recorder. And yeah, and I was like, "Oh my god, I need to do this again." And so I signed up for all these courses at a local community college, and I'm like just heavy deep into music now, and it's a passion. It's like I get to express myself in this way that's really important to me, and I put a lot of effort into it. And what's happened is that by doing that and work not being my primary source of expression and like identity, as a and also like so I've got this whole kind of like expression of self through how I dress and how I am in the world as a non-binary person, and then music and art and creativity and all that. And then I've got work, and by having this exterior kind of outlet of expression that has nothing to do with work, has now kind of in the last 6 months allowed me to come back to work in a way where I'm like, okay, well, what is it about work that I do like? And what is my role there? And what I've kind of come to realize is that I want to like be the best coworker I can be to people, or the best coach to my clients, because that makes their life easier. And that's good. And and that has nothing to do with capitalism. And it has nothing to do with a lot of things that I don't necessarily, or things I don't get behind, things I have a hard time getting behind. It's not about money. It's not about like scaling. It's not about efficiency. I mean, it is. Ultimately, it all comes back to efficiency. When people are collaborative and nice to each other, they're more efficient. Like, the psychological safety is the number one like indicator of successful teams. So, and you create that by creating belonging, and you create belonging by, first of all, being truly, it's hard to say just being nice to people because that's a loaded term as well. It's about like showing up for yourself like you would show up for others, if you were being kind to them, and then actually also showing up for others in that same way. A lot of people don't show up for themselves in a truly kind way.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing that journey. I'm sure there are many who have gone through similar types of journeys with their respective orgs. Curious, when you came out as non-binary, what did you learn, not just about yourself, but about the system and the cultures you were working inside of?
I learned I learned ultimately that it's not binary, right? That it's not just man and woman, and that so much of our culture is built on that um, being the assumption. There's an assumption that you're either a man or a woman, and that's it. And the way we dress codes, the way we behave, how much we're paid, all these things are rooted in that. If you look at if you look at leadership in the world, most leaders are men. Most leaders are white men in Western culture, um, and that's a reality. By kind of having to go inside myself and question who I am based on all these assumptions that our culture projects onto us through the workplace. And in the workplace, I would say it's kind of strongest. There's this whole idea behind dress code, And I was raised in England where I had to, part raised in England where I had to wear school uniform from age 11 to 15, and there's still like an ickiness around that for me. But if you look at workplace dress code, it's simply there to set expectations around how you should look that is managed by somebody else. And that's very much what I'm not trying to go against that because I want to be annoying to people. I go against that because it doesn't feel right to me. And what I found in the workplace is in opening my own eyes to gender and exploring gender within myself, it's like putting on a pair of glasses that I never had and a new set of lenses through which I can see the world that is not as binary gendered as I used to see it. And that's a journey that will last the rest of my life, that learning. And what I learn a lot is that in the workplace, I get to be that person who sees that and also be an ally and an advocate for people who are not seeing it and maybe even if they're not intending to, are doing harm by not seeing it.
Looking back on that, how did aligning your internal identity with your external work change the way you now define success, or even the way you chose where to stay?
What I'm learning being part of the DIA committee, we're working with a really great consulting firm here in Portland. So two women, black woman and a white woman, who have decades of experience doing DIA work. And they are reminding me that, and I know this, but we all get it's easy to get impatient with change when it's needed. And they're reminding us constantly of how we have to build a foundation that allows for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And that's going to take a long, long time, like years and years and years. The work will never end. And the thing that I'm realizing about myself is that before I was so kind of results driven on efficiency in the sense of time, right? Trying to reduce lead times, reduce throughput times, all that kind of stuff. And when it comes to cultural change, you can't approach it that way. What you have to do, I feel now, is you have to put your best foot forward in a way that's humble and not trying to push or force anything. I always say that you can't force people to do anything. You can only influence. And sometimes influence comes in the form of a gun, that's influence too. But ultimately, in the workplace, we often try and tell people what to do and we expect them to do it because it's their job, right? But that's not how it works. I mean, if they do it begrudgingly, yeah, okay, they've done it, but are they going to really remember to do it again? Do they care about it? So the thing I'm learning is that my metric for success is changing from here's a goal, we have to reach this, to here's something we'd like to get to, and there's milestones along the way. And what's our next milestone? And what can we do today to kind of move us towards that milestone? And as long as we've done our best that day to move us towards that milestone, that's all we can do. That's a good result. It's the result is no longer the end goal, it's the journey. And showing up in that journey in a way that's ethical and feels good and is moving us towards the next milestone that will eventually lead to a goal. And what will often happen along the way is that the goal changes, right?
Right, of course.
So, and that allows for the agility then, if you have that perspective, to not be like, because it's so easy to like have a goal change and then people are like, wait, that's my goal. It can't change. And then they're forcing a goal that no longer is necessary and relevant.
Damn. You talk a lot about alignment, which I love and definitely resonate with. Where do you see people often confusing alignment with comfort? And what does that confusion quietly cost them over time?
Yeah. I mean, I see it a lot where, like in our company, we did a poll, a great place to work poll, and we scored pretty damn high. But then when you dig into the results a little further, it's like, you realize that the reason we scored so high probably is because it's mostly a company of white male engineers who all think the same way. So often, like, we confuse that comfort of like, I'm so comfortable in this workplace. I feel so great. It's like, well, is that because this is actually a place where everybody feels belonging? Or is it because you're just part of the majority of how people show up there? Yeah. And these days, like, I don't, you know, like when I'm surrounded by a bunch of other guys, they used to assume I'm just another guy and they talk to me like they were any other guy. And I've been in situations where like a bunch of guys get together and they talk about women in certain ways. And I'm just like, why are you talking this way in front of me? Like, do you not understand? This is not okay for me. Like, in that sense, you can just treat me like there's a woman in the room because like that's my perspective. It's not the same as a woman, my perspective, because I don't have that lived experience, but like it's also not the same as a guy because like I don't feel that way. And like it's not okay to say these things. So, like alignment is so often like rooted in being comfortable around people that are like you. And like true alignment as a company, if you're aligned with being an inclusive workplace that is open to create belonging for everybody, which I think is literally impossible in our current political and economic landscape, but we can get as close as we can possibly can if we're doing better. The better is really to recognize that if you're not feeling a little uncomfortable as somebody who is representative of the majority of that company, then the place is probably not very well aligned with being inclusive.
And you've made an important distinction between ambition and also agency. How do you define that difference? Does that distinction change at all? Like the way people make career decisions?
Ambition and agency. Can you expand a little more on that?
Yeah, I remember seeing in some of your work, you talk about, people having the agency to do said thing, but
Mhm.
also the ambition to do something. So like sometimes that there's like a distinction between the two, like wanting to do and truthfully being able to do. And so just curious
Yes.
about that.
And how that's changed in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, not in the work, but how that distinction changes the way people make career decisions.
oh, I see. I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I have an ambition to be an independent coach. That's what I was doing in between kind of leaving this industry and going back to it. I was a DEIA coach working focused 100% on working with cisgender heterosexual white guys in helping them think around like what their role is in DEIA and how they can show up in a way that's useful and doing the good work. It was not a good time to do the career switch into that when I did it.
Right. Can only
So
imagine.
the ambition is there and it still is, but do I have the agency to do it? No, not right now. Like I can't afford to do it. It's literally, politically become targeted as an industry. And yeah, it's I don't have the agency right now. I'm working towards it slowly. And yeah, I see that in the workplace all the time in lots of different ways. Like it's so easy for a company to be ambitious about some goal. Again, coming back to goals, right? But do we actually have the agency? Like, no, like we don't have the agency because we're not a company. And I was saying we are a company in general, but just in general, like most companies are so hierarchical that like people aren't given the agency to, we're sold this ambition of like, we're sold this idea of like join this company, climb the corporate ladder, you can have ambition, you can do all these things. But the reality is that like most of the time it's always going to be a very narrow kind of like way in which that ambition or in which you can kind of like achieve ambition. We can have ambition within a corporate environment of where we want to go, but like I said earlier, things change all the time. So whatever ambition we have, the chances that we'll actually be able to get there are really slim, I think, most of the time. And in that sense, we don't have the agency to kind of express ourselves in the way we want to professionally. Like I have this in my company too. We have a very kind of like linear progress from like my role into the next role, which means I would go from being a coach, strategic energy management coach, to a program manager, which is a totally different kind of job. And I have zero interest in doing. And we don't currently have a career path that is different than that. And they're interested in creating one, and that's really good. And I feel very lucky to have that opportunity. But often that's not the case. So like we have our own ways in which we want to express ourselves. That's constantly changing. Like if we're growing as humans, we're constantly changing how we want to express ourselves and what we want to do and what we're interested in doing. And I think creating environments where you allow people to thrive means like allowing people to change what they want to do at work. Like sure, it can't change like that, but like allowing people to maneuver in their, and it might go from being I'm a manager and now I'm not a manager, and that's okay. But then we're not going to like pay you tons less money because all of a sudden now you're not as valuable. I think that's BS. I think people should get paid based on following their passion and doing it well. And if we did that, we'd have such a much more efficient workforce, and people would be like enjoying their jobs much more.
What I'm hearing here is a lot with what you're saying is around you've come into this whole leading without hiding, right? And obviously there was in the prior role, it created some risk. Truthfully, that didn't work out in that role, but you found your way. Now you found your way back into this space again. I wanted to zoom out for a moment and just reflect a little bit and have you reflect on what is all of this taught you, right? Now that you're back in this space, you're working with the company that seems to be obviously aligned with who you are. What has all this taught you?
What's interesting, you started the question with saying that like, not wanting to hide at work or not wanting to, but I think what it's actually taught me is how to hide effectively. So like code shifting, you know, I never learned that growing up. I didn't need to. And I was talking to my friend about it, Chinese woman who's a very good friend of mine. And yeah, she was like, "Oh yeah, you're learning how to code shift. Congratulations." I'm like, "Oh yeah." Um, and that's been, and I think it's a really important lesson for me to be able to show up and be a part of the workplace in a way that does feel good for me. But not, I didn't have that experience at the last workplace. So I wasn't able to, and I was just showing up the way I wanted to show up, but it was like too abrasive. It was too much for them. And it was like hard for me because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do that. I'd never taught that. I mean, everybody learns it to a certain degree, but like, this is a whole different thing. Like now I have to just, now I can show up at work knowing like, I mean, it's not even just work, even with family members and certain friends, who just are more conservative. Like I have to be mindful. Like I don't wear nail polish when I'm going to industrial facilities that I work with. I make sure I don't have nail polish on when I go into those, or eye makeup or other stuff. Like I have, and at work I can, like in my office where we are in Portland, I could do that. That's not a problem. But when I go down and see our clients, which are industrial spaces usually, yeah, like I have to kind of shift, and I don't tend to introduce my pronouns when I'm going to industrial facilities, but I do in my workplace here in Portland. So it's a matter of like, yeah, like I have to kind of like be different people in different places. And then, but doing it in a way where I'm still preserving my own honor and who I am and honoring myself and not putting that ownership on other people who just aren't there yet.
Right. And I would imagine too that, especially in certain environments, there could potentially be a safety issue as well, right? Like you want to make sure, you said people who may not be there yet, at times responses, you just never know what you're going to get. And so I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but at times do you ever, from a safety standpoint, also try to implement some of those code switching?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, that's why I don't wear nail polish too. And eye makeup when I go to industrial facilities because it doesn't feel safe, like especially in this current political environment, like trans people are pretty targeted and like it's easy for me to hide and not look at all trans. And that's essentially what I do when I go to industrial facilities, which is a privilege for me to be able to do.
So would love to talk a little bit now about some lessons learned. What did you misunderstand most about leadership earlier in your career, especially before you have the clarity you have now?
I think the idea that a leader is the person who decides what's done and tells people what to do. And now I think a leader is someone who supports people to do the best possible work they can do and steps back and is able to manage the discomfort of not having the oversight that they would like to have.
Makes a lot of sense. And would love for you to share some advice for our audience. For someone who is maybe quietly questioning their career, but feels anchored by stability, and that could be from money, identity, or even expectations. What's the first honest step you think they should take?
I think the first step is what are you questioning? Like, where is that question coming from? Like, where inside of you is that question arising from, or externally, where's that question coming from? Like, what's leading to this question? Explore that. Go deep. You know, journal. Do whatever it takes to get to the root of that question, because that ultimately will give you some idea of where to go next. And the other thing I would say is that, like, ultimately, it's a financial calculation as well. You know, like, if that question arises a a deep need of like, yeah, I need to change because of this job does not align with my identity in any way, and I feel like I cannot in any way show up and truly be myself. And the amount of energy I'm putting into code shifting at work is taking away my ability to show up after work for myself and others. Like, if you're at that point, then like, yeah, you probably want to like shift, right? But if you're at a point where like, and it's kind of where I'm at right now. It's like, this isn't perfect by any stretch of imagination. Company could be way better and more inclusive, but I'm very comfortable where I'm at. And this is not a good time to be changing careers financially, like just in the economic place where we're at. And I should probably stick around for a while, but like, at least I know where I want to go and I'm slowly working towards that. And I'm also like I'm able to be pretty honest with my boss about that as well. And they support me and like eventually they know I'm gonna become an independent coach one day again.
Yeah, that's great that you have that type of support. Looking forward, what are you most hopeful about in the future?
I think right now, like I was actually watching a little video. Do you know who Billy Porter is? He's an actor.
Oh
Billy
yeah,
Porter.
yeah, yeah.
So I was watching a little interview with him this morning where someone asked him like, "What makes you hopeful right now?" And he was saying something along the lines of that. Right now, this administration and people in this country are essentially like they're pushing so hard and they're like doing such crazy things that even the media are now like, "Hey, hang on, this is not okay." Whereas, like, even like a year ago, it was still like, well, let's talk about this. Like, let's reach across the aisle. Let's do these things. And this is kind of what Billy Porter was saying. Like, there is no more reaching across the aisles. Like, this has to end. This is not okay. Like, and I think right at the end, he said, like, if the roles were reversed right now and the president was not Republican, there's no chance that this person would still be president with what's happening. Um, and and to speak from like a larger I think that right now what's happening is that I think our current administration is and everything that's tied up with that is like a scared animal that's dying backed into a corner. These are old, mostly white men who cannot continue to live the way that they've shown up in the world because it's no longer accepted, and that freaks them out and they don't like it, and they're taking it out on everybody and are not able to kind of reconcile that within themselves. And what gives me hope is that like the fact that we're here at that point where they are like no longer accepted by the majority of our society and our culture is gives me a lot of hope. And like coming from Europe as well, when I go back to Europe, I still see that like Europe is not having that conversation yet. They're still like very much rooted in this kind of let's all be nice to each other and colonialization and racism. We don't talk about that. Whereas here, that like that conversation is you cannot go through life without having that conversation anymore. Um, and I think that conversation is what's leading to this turmoil that we're seeing right now, which is awful. But I also think that it's a reflection of like a really good conversation that we're willing to have in this country that other countries are not willing to have yet. So like that gives me a lot of hope.
And
Yeah.
what's one question you have for me that I could hopefully answer?
How's your perspective on work and identity within the workplace and career change from doing all these interviews?
Yeah, I think identity, what's interesting? When I think about identity, I think about it in more so the professional sense around like, I'm this accountant, I am a designer, I am an attorney, right? I think what you've brought to the show is personal identity, right? Which I love the lens that you've brought to this conversation around that. But the show has showed me that as we think about professional identities, and I can actually attest to this personally prior to the show, is that, wow, we get so caught up in these things, right? I am an attorney, right? I am a doctor or I am a nurse. And we get so caught up in these identities of ours that they almost become limiting factors for what we allow ourselves to do. And not even necessarily even allow, but just even think that we can do because we're so stuck in this professional box, fill in the blank. And what I've loved about these conversations over these years, and this has been, a great season, is that you just continue to hear how folks have, one, taken a step back and recognized that, you know what, maybe this specific professional identity is not who I'm becoming, is not who I truly want to be anymore. And they've then given themselves the latitude to be like, you know what, let me explore a little bit. And I've loved seeing that and hearing that. I always say I didn't know where a lot of these conversations were going to go when I first started this show. And it's been beautiful to witness everyone's reflection. And then truthfully, when I, in my DMs and things like that, hear how folks see themselves in the guests that show up. And so that's been the biggest kind of eye-opening thing for me, is how limiting we keep ourselves because of our own respective professional identities.
Yeah.
And kudos to everyone who is finally or in the process of looking at that a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with, and I'm going to say identity as a lawyer, as a doctor, there's nothing wrong with that. But thinking you can only do one thing because you're this thing, I think is way too limiting.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Great question. Well, Kjell, I just want to thank you again for joining the show today. Like I said, I'm glad Lori connected us. Before we wrap, I would want to definitely give you space where you can share where people can find you and support your work. So where can people look you up?
On my website, so it's my last name, vanzoen.com. And from there, you can find everything else. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. You can also type my name into Google. I'm the only Kjell van Zoen in the world, and you'll find a ton of stuff.
I love that. Right? Clearly unique. So want to thank you for all that info. And look, that'll do it for today's episode. Again, I want to thank Kjell van Zoen for joining me today. I'll share all their info in the show notes. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll definitely see you next time. Kjell, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Why I Left. Join us next time for more inspiring stories about growth, resilience, and transformation. Visit us online at www.whyileft.co. That's whyileft.co.